I appreciate you joining us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
What are the key attributes of a modern leader?
It's interesting in thinking about this question. You wonder about modern leader, ancient leaders. And I think there are some things that make a modern leader, I suppose, that are certain attributes that may have an impact. But I would actually prefer just to talk about what are the key attributes of a leader. It could have been Alexander the Great. And then these other sort of incidentals that we have to deal with today we can handle those. But I think very much at the top of the list is a high energy level. I've never known a leader on a personal level, or if you're reading a history of famous leaders, one characteristic that pops out is an astonishingly high energy level. Okay, and notice I'm not talking about leaders and followers here. I'm talking about on a personal level. You have to be able to plug away. Okay, I think another characteristic is the capacity to see how things are now, okay, and how things could be. And then I'll add a third trait would be you see how things are now and how they could be, and then you have a passion to move from here to there, coupled with an overall passion to serve. The passion to serve the goal of getting from here to there.
What was the circumstance that made you become a leader?
Okay, interestingly, I never wanted to become a leader. This was never an aspiration. It was never part of my bucket list when I was young, and even as I got older. In my case, what happened is I sort of fell into leadership positions largely by accident, and the real key was that when I would do something, I made sure I did it right. And so in my particular case, whatever leadership that I displayed, characteristics that I displayed, was tied to the fact that people could count on me to deliver whatever it is they wanted to be delivered. And then I think in terms of personality, I was always amenable to, I was open to suggestions. I was amenable to recognizing that a particular perspective I had, I needed to adjust it. And something I think that's important to point out, and I don't think every leader had this background, but I come from 6 generations of missionaries, and our fundamental goal has been for 6 generations is largely to serve. So I don't think when I'm out there doing things right, people could also see I'm not doing it for some ulterior motive. I genuinely wanted to serve and to do the best job I could. But I never, even when I was a kid, and I became appointed the lead performer in 5th and 6th grade. I never even aspired to it. I think the teachers just thought I would do a good job, and I did a good job, so they had me come back for 6th grade. So for me, it wasn't part of my bucket list.
What are the 3 challenges for a leader today?
Okay, now I do think that today we do face challenges that are quite different from what challenges leaders would have in the past. And I'm talking right now too, I'm not talking about global leadership per se. I'm talking about leadership in organizations and being a team leader. So more on the middle and micro levels. And I think one of the biggest challenges I'm seeing is this democratization induced by social media and the internet, because we have a very interesting situation arising these days that wasn't an issue in the past. In the past, in public, I'm a professor, so a lot of my leadership is in the thought leadership area, and I publish a lot of articles. And in the old days, we used to say you filter, then publish, meaning you recognize that your ideas weren't the greatest ideas in the world, and then you would go through peer review. Outsiders would review it, and they would critique the daylights out of it, and if you didn't like the criticism, you weren't going to get published. But nobody thought that you had all the answers, and the fact that, very often people weren't even asking you your opinion. But the point is, if you had an opinion, it had to pass some kind of a quality threshold before then it would be accepted and implemented. And I think what we're finding today with this mass democratization through social media is that everybody, it's so easy today just to post something on a blog and to feel that your your opinion is just as good as anybody else's opinion. And so what we've done is we've moved to, it used to be filter then publish. Today, in a sense, we've gone publish, meaning you expose your opinions and broadcast them, and then filter, let other people figure out whether your opinion has value. Now, on an actual team, if I'm leading a team of my employees, or on a project, or if I'm leading a company, the sensitive point here is that everybody's expecting that they can make input on any and every issue that has arisen. So learning how to manage that process, I think it can be managed, and I think you can set expectation without becoming an Adolf Hitler, okay? But you can, part of your challenge in being a leader is to know how to manage the process of what I call mass media democratization phenomenon. Other challenges that you have is, I think, to be flexible. Okay, today, and in part, this is being driven by the mass media democratization. You have to recognize that you're not going to be getting very clear, things aren't clearly laid out. You don't have things, a straight line that you need to follow. I think that's an important challenge that we have today in leadership. And I think another challenge is to learn to find your voice and to be able to articulate your particular perspective so that it's conveyed to other people. And if you're not a great communicator naturally, then you got to work at it, okay? But I think the capacity to effectively communicate through words that are written, spoken words, but I think most important is through your own actions.
Are having goals important to achievement and career development?
This is one of those yes, but answers, in my opinion, for me at least. And everything I'm saying right now is totally based on my personal experience. I'm not making general principles, especially in this particular case. Okay, in my case, my family, I'm the third generation doctor in my family. My father and grandfather were medical doctors. I'm the sixth generation with a college degree. So the goal of achieving at a minimum a bachelor's and moving on to becoming a doctorate, I'm not even sure that was a goal. That was an expectation, and no one imposed it. It's just that was the way our family worked. That was kind of what we did as a family. But think about it, as a professor, my number one job, of course, is lecturing or producing material and conveying it to students. But my number two job is to do career counseling with students. And one of the things in the career counseling is to ask them, envision where is it you want to be 5 years from now, regardless of where you are now, and what's it going to take to be there. And if you want to be a professor, for example, you need to establish the goal of getting that doctorate. And then getting a doctorate, the typical process is 4 to 6 years. And some people, because they have other business distractions, it's 6, 7, 8 years and all that. So you need to have, you're never going to become a professor, certainly a full-time professor, the kind of professor you probably want to be, the kind that we see in the movies, without getting the doctorate, and that requires you then to establish the goal of working towards a doctorate. That's just an example of a doctorate. In life, clearly there's, if you want to build a bridge, then you have a goal that has to do with site conditions, that has to do with many things that you need to start preparing for. On the other hand, you need to be very, very flexible. When I do my career counseling with students, I point out, as soon as you see an opportunity that can expand your capacity, that actually moves you forward in some way to achieving your goal, or maybe your goal itself. You may have an opportunity that causes you to shift your goal, but when you've done something, when you come across an opportunity like that, seize on it. In my own life, there was no clear step-by-step achievement of leadership and doing the kinds of things that I'm doing now and making any kind of achievement. It was a zigzag path, okay, and I'm going a little bit left, a little bit right. But one thing I can say is I never ever, in any of the moves I made, career moves, I never stepped backwards. I did some lateral, even the lateral moves moved me forward a little bit.
How important is it to gain international experience?
Very personal answer. Okay, I was raised in Iran, missionary family, and I didn't learn English until we came back to America at the age of 5 and 6 is, I guess, when I picked up English. All my cousins were raised in Africa, South America, all over the world. So my family has been international, and this has been going on, the international part's been going on for 3-4 generations in my family. Now that wasn't the work experience, but certainly my perspective on life was affected by my international background. And I want to say, it's one of the things I have to say that really did distinguish me from other people. And I imagine, I haven't thought about that, it's a good question, but I imagine it gave me certain perspectives and gave me a certain edge, as it were, helping me to move forward. So I would say that certainly international experience, as a general rule, it depends on what you're actually leading. If you're just leading some small community organization, it may not be that important, although my community organization is now 40% international. So I guess as a general rule, if you can gain the international exposure, I think that can give you an edge, and I think it can significantly affect your leadership posture.
Is it important to have mentors and coaches in your life?
In my life, I never had a mentor or coach guiding me. I've had people offering friendly suggestions. In my life, the super crucial guidance I got was the role models of a number of people. And then my goal was, I was so impressed by some of these role models, and my goal then, I suppose, was to pursue, and the guidance I got was to pursue, to try to match up and to use these role models. And in my personal case, it was all the key role models were family members. My father was a world-class scientist who taught at Columbia University after we came back from Iran, and he made many discoveries that have saved literally millions of lives. His specialty was in tropical medicine. My mother is probably the most, so my dad gave me the goal of whatever I do it the best and serve people. Okay, that was from my dad. My mom was one of the most energetic, focused people. She'd walk into a room. She was also physically astonishingly beautiful, but she wasn't a wallflower beauty. When she would walk into a room, people would just gravitate to her, and there I saw the power of charisma and focus, and she was very energetic, and she made substantial business achievements herself. And then my oldest sister, Sally, started off humbly as a sales girl at Lord & Taylor's when she was in college, and quickly, in a matter of a few years, she became a buyer, and then she became CEO of the Talbots, Ann Taylor, and Abercrombie & Fitch, and these are three of the leading retailing organizations in the United States. And it's so much fun to open up a Wall Street Journal article talking about my sister, describing her and what an effective business manager she was. So I think those role models, all of which entailed aspiring to excellence. Every one of these three people, my dad, my mom, and my sister, were just super excellent. And then when my little sister, ultimately, as she was finding herself, and then she got focused, and I guess the academic background kicked in, because after moving around a little bit hippie-like and so on, she suddenly resolved that she wanted to serve people. She wants to serve women. She got involved with eating disorders, and then ultimately became a therapist and got her PhD from Columbia University, and she's a very successful therapist, dealing primarily with helping women to deal with some of the issues that they face.
How important is personal relationships to building a profile?
Now, in trying to build a professional profile, I think if there are opportunities through relationships to have doors opened, I think you need to seize it. I think a very big key I want to, if I were to reiterate something several times, one of the things I would reiterate is that you need to seize the opportunities that you come across. For me personally, the relationships that I developed that helped me to move forward, they came as a consequence of achievements that I had made. In the beginning, very humble achievements, and then people would come over and basically say, hey, you know, let me get you into this particular organization or this particular activity, or I'm going to promote you, and so on. So, and these were some key people. So, in my particular case, I didn't go through lists and say, okay, who are the people I should contact to find an opportunity. By doing the best job I could, I was able then to develop relationships, and at a certain point, there was a critical mass of relationships that have been very important to me. Then, I'll say, in the advanced career stage. In the early stages, I did not create lists of people to contact to help me out. But later on, as I had my reputation, then those relationships helped me. They opened doors to me at very senior levels. I worked with top corporations and top management of top corporations, and none of that would have happened without people opening doors. But they wouldn't have opened the doors had I not reached the point, the threshold that I did achieve.
What is the secret to working in virtual teams?
Now, one of the nature of my work has involved me dealing with a lot of telecommunications companies, and I began doing work in virtual teams back 15, almost 20 years ago. I had the good fortune at that time to be the lead project management educator at an organization called SITA, S-I-T-A, which is the telecommunications arm of the airline industry. So any country that has an airport, there's a little room, you'll see the sign on the door, it'll say SITA, and then they're concerned with from the pilot, air to ground, ground to air communications. So they were truly, they perhaps were the most global company on earth. They worked everywhere that there's an airport. And so they began trying to sell some of those services and products throughout the world. And with them, so in working with them, their headquarters, SITA's headquarters were in Paris. Their sales arm was in Atlanta. Their design center, because they're always designing new equipment, was in San Diego. And yet all their customers were throughout the world. I mean, they were a lot of them were in the Pacific and Africa. They were primarily working, as they joked, we would go to the places that the big players haven't locked in. And so there were two lessons we learned through that experience. And one was that if it's at all possible, when you have a virtual team, in some way to make it as physical as you can. Okay, if you as the project manager, for example, at least visit the site, even if it's in Bora Bora, that would be helpful. Sometimes that's not possible. But then you share photos and bios. And I'm talking about back in the earlier days of the internet, when these kinds of practices we were struggling with them and trying to figure out how to deal with things. But that helped enormously when people could actually see who the other people were, and when you hear the voice on the teleconference, or this was even pre-video conference, some of this. Another thing is that I'm academic dean of a university where about 25% of our activities is in Asia. And we learned very early in the game, 18 years ago, that we needed to create protocols for virtual team communications. So what we wound up doing, and it worked very well, and we still do it today, is at the end of the day, if I need to communicate with my China China corresponding team member, there's a 12-hour difference. I don't even have to set my watch differently when I travel to China. It's a 12-hour difference. What I do is I and my other team members is that the questions we have, or the points we make, We send them off at the end of at the close of business. Then we go home. I guess we have dinner. We do whatever we're going to do. Meanwhile, the folks in China are just coming to the office. They get those messages. They work on them, and then they have their questions and their issues and their directives. And at the end of their day, they send us their particular concerns and their answers to our questions. So what we've done very successfully, in our opinion, is we've developed patience to recognize that we have a 12-hour lag between in our communications, and then just to live with it. And nobody, it's not an issue. Okay, if there is a real crisis, of course, you wake them up out of bed, or they wake us up out of bed with a direct phone call. But for 98% of our business, we follow that protocol.
What advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
I have a chance. A lot of people come up to me. I'm not a kid anymore, and they come to me and ask me for guidance on how to be a leader, okay, and what steps they can take. And my answers in general, I can't say them. Increase your energy level. That you have a higher energy level, or you don't have a higher energy level. I can't say. Be born in another country, they're born in another country, or they're not, and so on. What I do tell them is that whatever you're working at, okay, be absolutely as good as you can be. The way, certainly when you're young, the way you're going to be a leader is that people are going to pull you up, okay, your senior managers, okay, people above you. So that's how you become a leader. There are some, famous examples of Michael Dell and so forth who pushed their ways up, and I'm sure Larry Ellison at Oracle pushed his way up. But for the most part, you're going to be pulled up, and the only way that you're going to get pulled up is if you're really excellent. And so you work hard and do the best job you can do. Develop your communication skills to the best of your abilities, so that people understand what it is you're getting at, that you can explain. If there's I do, my work is largely on projects, and if there's a crisis, and there are crises all the time, if I can clearly explain the crisis, no one's going to beat me up. They can understand what happened. If I bungle my explanation and people don't know what's going on, I'm never going to, in that organization, forget about any future leadership prospects. And also when things go well, to be able to help your bosses envision how they can go better and where else you can go. Those are, to me, I think, the kind of things that I like to tell young people, and then just stick with it and don't get discouraged. I've never known any leader who had a direct path. Everything is just, life is filled with setbacks as you're moving forward. You don't get discouraged, and then seize opportunities. Anytime you see an opportunity that can move you forward, I may be wrong on this for a lot of people, but certainly in my own case, never step back.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.